In its comparatively short post-war career, the Dutch International Tulip Rally has established itself as one of the most popular and best-run events in the calendar. For one thing, it comes at such a pleasant time of year, and the friendly people of Holland do all they can to make their motoring guests feel welcome and at home. In Holland, they certainly know how to say it with flowers. In the countryside near Noordwijk, where the rally has its headquarters, the letters BHP might well stand for bulb horsepower. But the Dutch are very keen on motoring too, and the 7th Tulip Rally attracted an entry of 207 cars from 9 countries to compete in 4 categories, subdivided into no less than 14 capacity classes. In addition, for the first time, a complicated handicap system was introduced, and the basic recipe of the 1800-mile road section was also a departure from what had become the traditional pattern of the Tulip Rally. For from the start, all roads led comfortably towards Stuttgart. The autobahns of Germany make motoring easy, and after a night in which to shake down to the job in hand, experienced tulip drivers were inclined to mutter that the rally was no longer the furious dice it used to be. But the temptation to crack along the high-speed concrete is irresistible to most, and Bill Banks, who's come nearer to winning the Tulip than any man, is no exception. The Triumph TR2s were there, of course, in force, and the official works entry, here Jimmy Ray leads Bob Dixon and Ken Richardson, fell into line ahead, followed by Lola Grounds and Cherry Osborne out for the ladies' prize, and motoring editor Gregor Grant. But even despite the gentle prelude to the Tulip of '55, several cars ran into trouble before reaching the Stuttgart control, and the Triumph team had a narrow squeak when Ray and Waddington lost themselves on the outskirts of the city, but made it with seconds to spare. Competitors now relaxed for what was described as a day of rest. But compulsory participation in a tour of the city, including the motorworks, and a deal of official hospitality, made the visit to Stuttgart scarcely a rest cure. Early to bed would have seemed a good idea, for ahead lay the serious motoring of the trip, and it involved an early start. The famous Schloss Solitude was the starting control, and Ray Brooks was one of the early men away. Old friends and rivals were as usual met to do battle, and Sheila Van Dam, the European ladies champion, was out for further laurels, while other ideas on the matter were held by Nancy Mitchell. The Triumph TR2s in the 2-litre sports section had a handicap time of 18 minutes to be added to their total times for the eliminating tests. These handicaps were awarded to individual models on the standard of performance expected by the organisers, The aim was, of course, to give every competitor an equal chance of outright victory. Although in the same class, John Gott's AC Ace, on the other hand, had 17 minutes handicap. Modified Ford Zephyrs were given 17 minutes, Standard Zephyrs 13, the Standard Sunbeams 14, and so on. But evidently this Dutch crew were happy to carry the additional handicap of national costume as well. The road from Solitude involved some 60 miles of pleasant going to the start of the first special section. And the only worry was the fear of secret checks and the penalty for exceeding a 75 km/h average. But in the tree-clad mountains of the Black Forest, the motoring really began in earnest. First came the eliminating test on the famous Freiburg hill climb and the opportunity to taste the effects of the handicap times. Once again, the mountains soon had the rally in its true perspective. But as competitors followed the beautifully prepared route card, so typical of the event, which led them into the heart of this most romantic corner of the German countryside, for the most part, they could only guess at how the pattern of the competition had emerged. The Citroëns, for instance, had found the 12-minute handicap too much, but Dutchman Tack with a 300 SL Merc now led the field, with Martin's TV Fiat close behind, followed by John Gott, Jimmy Ray's TR2, and Gatsonides' little Standard 10. Meantime, the passing field bore no relation to these mathematical facts. And the hazards that beset the rally driver on his way continued to confront the cavalcade. So to the first of the notorious special sections of the Tulip, with the Dutch officials waiting, as at every time control along the route, to dispatch individual cars at minute intervals. Only 35 miles long, the section climbed and dived through the tortuous byways of the Black Forest, and it didn't take long for crews to realize that the rally had not, in fact, degenerated into a holiday tour of the beauty spots of Europe. Here, the handicap times were no longer of any significance. The task involved was merely to reach the next control within the specified time. The average speeds varied according to category, but involved hard work for all concerned. Dathan's A40 was by no means the only car to run into trouble on this section, and the proverb about crossing one's bridges became relevant early on. Melder and Montesquieu, who set off from Noordwijk with the Saab, and although this Dutch pair looked steady at this point with the Morris Minor, their teammates following very nearly did it again. Greta Molander, the Swedish lady veteran, was in a hurry. The Saabs, by the way, carried only 5 minutes handicap. Near misses worked out at about 1 per competitor per mile, but the Opel record of Versloot and Tegela did the thing in style. Miraculously, neither man was hurt in this frightening crash. In all, 18 crews lost marks on this section alone, and 5 or 6 retired. There was further trouble in the mountains of the Vosges, and at night came the second hill climb of the Col du Pin. When the cars reached Champagnole in the French Alps, 193 crews were still in the hunt, and of these, 154 were still unpenalized. But the special section from La Masche to Issingeau produced further incidents and penalties. 25 crews had retired by the time Montélimar was reached, though still 143 had succeeded in keeping on time. Of the more fancied teams, those of Triumph, Sunbeam, Saab, Mercedes and Taunus were still intact, and though Tack still maintained his position on actual times, Martens now led the classification on handicap. The route now followed the familiar rally roads of the Alps, and the beautiful landmark of the lake at Aix-les-Bains marked roughly the halfway stage. Now came the Jura sections thick and fast, and another familiar hill climb to well over 5,000 feet on the Col de la Faucille. Here, Tack again made a comfortable BTD, with Martens building up his lead to 16 seconds on handicap, Bill Banks, Engel and John Gott close behind. But for the enthusiastic motoring competitor, personal standards are every bit as important as the classified results. For instance, Gregor Grant's climb, some 30 seconds quicker than his time in 54, quite made his day. But Jimmy Ray lost a few seconds on an early hairpin, where Ken Richardson had to use reverse. So to the Ballon d'Alsace and its striking monument. By now, retirements had risen to 35, but 126 were still unpenalized. The Ballon is an old friend of the Tulip organizers, and since its inception, the itinerary has included a timed climb on this splendid hill. But of recent years, the clerk of the course has deemed a downhill run against the clock to be a cunning test for tired crews and even more tired brakes. And thus, the motor race downhill has become an annual highlight of the rally. It's not so bad when seen from the cinema seat, but for passengers, this test is not the most pleasant way to study the countryside. The downhill test demands precise judgment from the driver in every way. At this stage of the rally, every second is vital to the competitor's chances of success, for few opportunities now remain for any spectacular improvement of position. And furthermore, as downhill fast puts pure engine performance at a discount, here is an opportunity to sneak a few seconds from the more potent motors of the opposition. However, the risks involved must equally be weighed. A hair's breadth of over-enthusiasm could mean complete disaster. The brakes have a very severe pounding still to come, and the finish in Holland is still more than 600 miles away. Nevertheless, Jimmy Ray was but fractionally slower than Tack in the 300 SL Mercedes. Now the tide had turned against Lola Grimes and Cherry Osborne, and further misfortune still awaited them. Grant Norton's ace was not as fast as Gott's, but Jimmy Ray was now fourth, only 1.6 seconds behind the motoring policeman, despite the odd minute of handicap. Boardman and Whitworth were now leading the big standard touring car class. The irrepressible Jackie Reese again demonstrated that funny stories are not his only strong suit, and Bill Banks continued to threaten the leaders. A pleasing sight for British eyes was the number of continental competitors who had elected to drive the products of this country's industry. Sheila Van Dam and Anne Hall were now engaged in a bitter duel with Sweden's Greta Molander. That very fast man, Peter Harper, was trying all he knew to beat the handicap. But Per Malling, the victor of Monte Carlo, was out of luck this time. So, towards the end of a busy day, the cavalcade turned north for Luxembourg and the route of 1,000 curves. Fortunes had changed. A minor accident ended Jimmy Ray's gallant efforts, and many cars still running had lost the edge of their performance. Tired eyes were not inclined to delight in the beauties of the sunset, and after dark came 24 kilometers of the difficult Nürburgring to whittle away the number of crews still unpenalized for lateness at control. Now, the final miles of the road section, the journey via the Eifel Mountains northwards towards Holland. And here again, the principal concern was for secret controls, a problem to keep crews on their toes to the very end. The Tulip's welcome back to Holland is as picturesque as the send-off. The frontier, which has seemed so desperately distant, brings a welcome promise of rest ahead, and the pleasant roads make the danger of sleeping at the wheel the principal hazard of the closing miles. At last, the great hotel, the Hustedine at Noordwijk by the sea. This Danish crew completed the road section without penalty, but were 10 minutes down on tests. But these boys were 8 minutes late. Greta Molander and the Saab team, however, had obviously done well. As the surviving cars were locked away overnight in the Parc Fermé, no less than 119 were clear of penalty marks, and the results of the Tulip of 1955 were by no means a foregone conclusion. Now came the final test at the Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit nearby. Although time was still the deciding factor, as in all the previous eliminating tests, this was in fact mass start motor racing over 10 laps in handicapped groups. Here's the quick 2-litre brigade, the 16 to 18 minute boys in action. At the end of lap 1, it's Ken Richardson's TR2, Cuth Harrison showing his mastery, John Gott third, and Slottermarker fourth. Richardson still in the lead. Slottermarker has moved up to second, and Gott has also passed Cuth Harrison. Now Harrison repasses Gott, who knows he's got to stay within striking distance of Richardson in the lead to win the class. Again, the AC forces past the Ford and the crowd adore it. Now the two R2s come to grips, and with a lap and a half to go, the Dutchman takes the lead. Slottermarker, Ken Richardson second, Gott third, Harrison. And so they finish, Gott winning the class from Richardson and Harrison winning the 3.5-litre modified touring award. The Category E event brought equally crucial racing. Peter Harper had to lick Engel's Mercedes 220 to win the class on an equal handicap. Sheila Van Dam was behind Nancy Mitchell and Greta Molander, but determined to do her best. Mrs. Mitchell knew she had little hope of retaining her lead on the Scandinavian lady, but pressed on regardless. However, some were a bit too regardless. Ah, well, he won't do that again. Engels wins, Harper is second, and Sheila Van Dam and George Hartwell fight it to the line. Race followed race in slick succession, but Martin's TV Fiat in the lead in the general classification is missing from the picture. With only Zandvoort between him and certain victory, the clutch disintegrated and the Belgian joined the spectators in the stands. But that's the way it goes in motoring. Without an element of luck, the odds are piled up high against the individual. Now comes the race of the day, with Gatsonides Standard 10 shooting into the lead. Gatso was out for the class, and Greta Molander, number 209, makes her bid for the ladies' prize. With her handicap advantage, Greta could scarcely fail to beat off the British girls who had already done the test. But the Saab and the little Standard make a real race of it. Now Miss Molander takes the lead with Gatso second and Melder third and falling back. The hairpin and 1 lap to go. And Greta beats Gatso to the line by that much. The crowd have surely had their money's worth. And so, to the victor, the true reward. The Standard 10 of Gatsonides and St. John Foster, standard in every sense, had won its class. The Triumph TR2 of Richardson and Heathcote was second in its class, and Gregor Grant won the Motor Holland Trophy. A good event, well run, and much enjoyed.